Welcome to our Safer Gambling training course, which is focused on knowing your customer. It should help you to understand what you need to know about your customers so that you're able to spot when something changes and may indicate that their gambling is becoming problematic, whether that's in their behaviour, their attitude or their language. It should also help you to understand when you might need to step in or when you might need to escalate your concerns to management. Knowing your customer is a critical pillar of protecting customers from gambling-related harm, and this course should help you to feel confident in identifying concerns and taking the right steps. We'll start with the foundations. In this first section, we'll cover why knowing your customer matters, what gambling harm actually is, and what your responsibilities are. Once we've got that grounding, the rest of the course is about spotting the signs and taking action. So let's set out what this training is and who it's for. This training is for everyone who has any contact with customers, whether you're behind the counter in a shop, on a customer service or phone team, managing online accounts, or are a licensed gambling operator or managing a gambling operation. If you or your activity interacts with customers via a gambling activity, then this training applies to you. The core idea is simple. The more you know your regular customers, how often they come in, what they usually stake, their mood, their style of play, their level of deposits, their frequency of deposits, the easier it is to notice when something changes. And all those small changes are often the first clue that someone may need support. It's important to remember this as we go through the slides. You are not expected to be a counsellor, a psychologist, or a problem gambling expert. Your job is to observe, recognise and act, and to escalate concerns when appropriate. That's it. Everything else today is just detail on how to do those three things well. Why knowing your customer matters. Gambling problems don't always look obvious, and customers very rarely tell us they're struggling. Instead, the problem usually builds slowly and shows up in small changes. More frequent visits, bigger bets, chasing losses, going quiet, or a change in mood. When you see signs of those types of shifts in behaviour, that should make you pause. A regular who suddenly stakes far more than usual, someone placing bet after bet to win back losses, a chatty customer who's gone flat and anxious. None of these on their own prove the customer may be developing a problem with their gambling, but they're worth noticing and considering further. Knowing your customer is what makes those changes visible to you and will help you when deciding whether to take further action to support the customer. And it's not just good practice. It's part of how we comply with the Gambling Regulation Act 2024 and the IBA's Safer Gambling Code. This training is here to give you the confidence to notice early and to take the right step before things begin to escalate. Now, let's look at what we actually mean by the phrase problem gambling, because it's a phrase you might hear regularly, and it helps if we're all working from the same understanding. Here's how we define it. Problem gambling is when a person finds it difficult to control their gambling, and it begins to cause harm or negatively affect their finances, relationships, health, work or other areas of their life. You can see on the right that others describe it in very similar terms. The Gambling Commission in Great Britain talks about gambling that compromises, disrupts or damages family, personal or recreational pursuits. And gamblingcare.ie, Ireland's National Gambling Support Service, describes it as a compulsion to continue gambling despite the desire to stop. Notice what all three have in common. Two ingredients: loss of control and harm. You don't need to memorise any of these definitions, and you're not expected to diagnose anyone. But keep those two ingredients in mind. That is, loss of control and harm. Because everything we cover today about noticing changes in customers comes back to them. It might be helpful at this stage to explain what we mean by gambling harm. For the vast majority of customers, gambling stays exactly what it should be, a fun adult leisure activity. But some people can move from gambling safely to being at some risk to experiencing real harm. And they can move back the other way too, especially with the right support. When gambling harm does take hold of a person, it can have many effects. It can affect their finances, cause strains in their relationships and family life, and it affects well-being, their sleep, stress, mood, or their ability to concentrate at work. So why does control slip for some people? Well, Dunlewy Addiction Services, who've run Ireland's national gambling helpline for over 15 years, explains it like this. Each bet can release dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical, which creates a rush and reinforces the urge to keep going. Because wins are unpredictable, the brain stays stimulated. Over time, emotions get tied to gambling and distorted beliefs, such as I'm due a win or I can control this, and they push people into chasing. You don't need to be a neuroscientist, but understanding this might help you see why a customer can lose control and why noticing really early matters. On this slide, we will look at the differences between normal gambling, problem gambling, and gambling addiction. People say problem gambler and gambling addict as if they're the same thing. They're not. Normal gambling is done for enjoyment. It stays within the person's control and what they can easily afford, and it does no harm. In fact, it's enjoyable. That's the green card. Full control and no harm. And it describes the vast majority of our customers. Problem gambling, on the amber card, is where gambling is starting to cause some type of harm to their finances, their relationships, work or well-being, and the person is beginning to lose control of their spend or their time. So control is reduced and there is some harm. This is exactly the definition we saw on the last slide. Gambling addiction on the red card is a recognised disorder, clinically called gambling disorder, and it's the most serious. It's where gambling has become compulsive, control is gone, and the person keeps going despite the harm it's clearly causing. It can be utterly devastating, not just for the gambler, but for their loved ones too. So here's why this matters for you. Most people gamble normally. When you know what normal looks like, you're far quicker to notice when something changes, when a customer may be moving from green towards amber or red. That's the whole foundation of this training, and it's what the next section is all about, recognising the signs. Here's a quick recap of section 1. Most customers gamble normally, but harm doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone. Knowing your customers is our best line of defence. The better you know what's normal for someone, the better placed you are to protect them from gambling harm. Remember that gambling problems build slowly in small changes, and customers very rarely tell us they're struggling, which is exactly why noticing matters. When problem gambling or addiction does take hold, it can cause extreme difficulties for the person and for the people around them. And finally, you're not a counsellor and you're not expected to be. Your job is to observe, recognise and act, and escalate concerns when appropriate. Section 2 is a key part of the course. It's about recognising the signs of problem gambling. We'll talk about knowing what normal gambling looks like, the specific problematic signs to watch out for, and the simple observe, recognise, act framework. Then we'll look at some real customer scenarios. Let's look at your responsibilities for safer gambling and knowing your customer. Know your customer. Learn what's normal for your regulars, how often they play, what they usually spend, their mood, their style of play, and trust your gut when something changes. Know the signs. Stay alert to changes in behaviour, mood, language, or patterns of play. And remember, no single sign is proof of anything, and it doesn't need to be. But concern is enough to act on. Then know the law. Under 18s cannot gamble. And in shops, apply a Think 21 principle. If someone looks under 21, ask for ID. Never ever serve a self-excluded customer. And keep your training current. That's not just company policy, it's a requirement under the Gambling Regulation Act 2024. To be clear, it's your employer's job to give you the tools, the systems and the support to do all of this. If there are any gaps in what you're being provided with, speak up. And lastly, escalate and record. Raise concerns with your manager and log them. It's not your call alone. You're never being asked to decide by yourself whether someone has a problem. So when you're unsure, raise it anyway. Raising a concern that turns out to be nothing is never a mistake. This training isn't new or optional. It's required under the Gambling Regulation Act 2024 and it's been part of the IBA Safer Gambling Code since 2021. So it applies to you today. Let's define Know Your Customer again, because it's central to this training. It simply means understanding what's normal for your customer, so that when something changes, it stands out to you. For your regulars or for the accounts you look after, build up a feel for how often they bet or play, what they usually stake and spend, their general mood, attitude and style of play. You don't need to write it down formally. You just get to know them in a way that helps you notice if a regular suddenly changes behaviour in some way. And remember, normal looks different depending on where you work. In a betting shop, it's familiar faces, their usual stakes, the usual bit of chat, what time of the week they come in. Online, it's typical deposit sizes, session lengths, the product someone plays and when. Maybe it's a phone customer, their usual call times, the tone of their voice, their bet types. Whatever the setting, the principle is the same. Know your customer and changes become obvious. On this slide, we'll look at some of the signs that may indicate somebody is developing a problem with their gambling. Customers rarely walk up and say, "I'm struggling." Instead, they'll show us through their behaviour, their language, their patterns of betting or play. So here are some of the main things to watch for. Stakes and spend. Have you seen a sudden jump from their usual bet size? Or maybe they're making bigger deposits or more regular deposits? Then there's time and frequency. Are they having more visits, longer sessions, or betting at odd hours like very early or very late at night? Are they chasing losses, placing a new bet straight after the previous bet over and over? Their mood and language, has it changed? Do you notice that they're irritable, anxious or withdrawn, or saying things like, "I have to win this back," or "I need this, I have to win this"? Then there's bonuses and free bets. Are they asking for them again and again, often just to keep playing? Or are they trying to get around the rules? Are there repeated account resets or dodging ID checks or attempting to bet while self-excluded? Here's the key point, and please hold on to it. You do not need all of these signs to be concerned about a customer. You don't even need most of them. If a regular customer changes how they act or how they gamble, even one or two of these signs, that's reason enough to pause, look into it a little bit further and raise it with your manager. Interestingly, these signs aren't just our policy. In May 2026, Europe published its first agreed standard for spotting gambling-related harm. It sits alongside national rules rather than replacing them, but it names 9 helpful behavioural markers operators should watch out for. They include changes in stake size or frequency, speed or intensity of play, deposit frequency, size or failed deposits, withdrawals and cancelled withdrawals, the customer contacting us out of the blue, session length or time of day play, using lots of different products, net losses building up over time, and changes to safety tools like limits and self-exclusion. You'll recognise most of those. They're very similar to what we just covered in the previous slide. So knowing your customer and acting on your gut instinct or on changes in their behaviour isn't only an IBA or regulatory expectation. It's recognised right across Europe as the best way to protect customers. Everything we've covered so far fits into 3 key action items: observe, recognise and act. Observe, know what's normal and keep a gentle eye on behaviour, mood and patterns. Recognise is to notice when something shifts or just doesn't feel right and trust your instinct rather than talking yourself out of it. Act means to discuss with your manager or compliance team first if necessary. Then have a calm, discreet word with the customer to let them know about the tools and supports available, to check in with them, see if they're okay, see do they need any support or advice or do they need to take a break. Always follow your company's procedure. And then there's escalate. When a concern looks real or whenever you're simply unsure, even after speaking with the customer, raise it again with your manager and record it. This is never your decision to carry alone. Escalating isn't passing the buck, it's doing your job properly. So let's see what this looks like with some real customer examples. Sometimes everything we've covered becomes much clearer when you actually see it in action. So let's look at 3 customers. We have George, the Thursday regular, Mary, the Greyhound fan who loves a chat, and Paul, who bets on the football online every Saturday. 2 customers from retail and 1 from online. Because the same principles apply on both sides, even if the signs look a little different. As we go through each story, ask yourself these 3 questions. What's normal for this customer? What's changed? And what would you do? Don't worry about getting the right answer. The point is to practice noticing. Meet George, the electrician. George is a Thursday regular, calls in after work, has a few tenner bets on the horses, and always good for a chat. That's his normal. This week though, he's been in 4 times already. He's putting down around €150 per visit and he's barely saying a word. You don't need to diagnose George immediately, but you do need to look at this carefully. This change in frequency, in his stake size and in his mood, all at once, is exactly the kind of changes we've been talking about. So what do? Discuss it with your manager or compliance team first if necessary. Then have a quiet, private, discreet word with George. Something small, something like, "George, are you okay today?" Offer him a support leaflet and explain the tools available about a timeout or self-exclusion. Direct him to gamblingcare.ie. Then log it in your social responsibility log and flag him for enhanced monitoring and regular check-ins. If you're still not satisfied he's in control after your first chat, then you need to speak to your manager or compliance team again, and they should probably step in and take the next steps to support George. Now, here's Mary, the greyhound fan. Mary normally has a couple of euro on the dogs and loves a chat with staff and other customers in the shop. She's one of your regulars. Lately, she's jumped to €50 a bet. She looks anxious, she's avoiding eye contact, and she's asked about free bets a good few times. That's a shift in stakes, in mood, and in language altogether, and merits a private chat, consulting with your manager or compliance team first if necessary. Ask her if everything's okay. Gently mention you've noticed a few changes and that you're a little bit concerned. Check how comfortable she is that her spend and activity are under control. Make sure she knows about the safer gambling tools available to her and give her a support leaflet or send it to her by email if she's online. Log it in your SR log and flag her for enhanced monitoring and regular chats. If Mary's behaviour continues like this, your manager will need another conversation with her and possibly need to check that her gambling is genuinely affordable. And if it isn't, the business relationship may have to end. One important practical note. In many companies, these safer gambling interactions are restricted to shop managers or deputy managers, so always follow your own company's policy on who does what. Finally, meet Paul, a regular online punter. His normal bet is a £5 on a football match or a €2 accumulator. Deposits about €20 a week and withdraws anything he wins. That's Paul's normal. This month though, several things have changed. He's logging in daily, often late at night. He's depositing €100 at a time. He's moved from football into live casino and slots. And his messages to customer support are getting emotional, asking about free bets and saying he has to win this time. Online, while you might not see a face, the data and the tone tell the story. And it's a significant shift in frequency, product, stake size and language. So after checking with your manager, you have an initial supportive conversation. Paul says he's grand, just has more time on his hands. But if you're not convinced, that doesn't have to be the end of it. You or your manager may need to investigate a little further, have another chat with him to see if he needs any support, or suggest maybe that he takes a break for a while. Or your manager may consider applying enhanced customer monitoring, which can include asking for proof of income to check that his spending is affordable. You can keep monitoring his activity, but his spend keeps climbing. At this point, you should bring in your manager and the safer gambling team and let them take over. They should have another supportive interaction with Paul where they show him his own account activity, the escalating deposits and stakes, and suggest that maybe he should consider a timeout or a break. They should signpost gamblingcare.ie to Paul and the free phone number, sending him a safer gambling leaflet and logging everything in the SR log. If Paul's behaviour does not change or keeps escalating, account closure may be the right call. So, let's have a quick recap on what we have learned from Section 2. Know what's normal for your customers. Watch for changes in their behaviour, mood, language, stakes, or patterns of play. One sign on its own may not mean anything, but several together may mean that the customer is starting to develop problems with their gambling. And your role is to observe and recognise problematic signs. You don't have to diagnose, but you do need to act, to take the next step as outlined in your company policy. Section 3 is about taking action. We'll cover how to approach a customer and escalate, the support tools available, how self-exclusion works, and the common mistakes to avoid. At this point, you've learned how important it is to know your customer, what the potential indicators of harm to look out for, and how to spot changes in behaviour, spending patterns, mood, language, and customer activity. So what happens next? Recognising a concern is only useful if you do something about it. Your role is to act appropriately when something doesn't feel right. That might mean discussing it with your manager or escalating it to your manager or compliance team. It may involve a chat with the customer. If so, it should always be calm, discreet and supportive. You're offering help, not confronting anyone. Sometimes it starts with a simple conversation. A quiet, "Are you okay today?" or "I've noticed you don't seem yourself lately," can open the door. You don't need to ever accuse, challenge or make assumptions. Often, simply showing genuine concern is enough to start a meaningful interaction. It's also important to make sure concerns are recorded in line with your company's procedures. What appears to be a small issue today may become more significant when viewed alongside other observations over time. Where appropriate, support should be offered to the customer. That may include information leaflets, info about safer gambling tools, time-out options, self-exclusion information, or directing customers to gamblingcare.ie or other support services. Concerns should never sit with just one person. Information should flow through the organisation so that the right people can assess the situation and decide what action, if any, is needed. Remember, your responsibility is not to solve every problem. Your responsibility is to notice concerns, take reasonable action and make sure the right people know about it. That's how early intervention happens, and that's how customers can receive support before harm becomes more serious. Let's run through the practical customer support tools that you can inform your customers about. And remember, these aren't only for people with gambling problems. They're for anyone who wants to gamble responsibly and have more control over their gambling activity. There are deposit and stake limits which let a customer cap what they put into their account or how much they transact daily, weekly or monthly. Timeouts are a short break from a few hours to a few days that customers can set for themselves. Reality checks are pop-up reminders about time and spend during a session. Product blocks let someone switch off from specific products like casino or slots while keeping others, maybe like betting. Activity statements show customers their own behaviour in black and white. It will show their total stakes, their winnings and how much they're up or down. And finally, there's signposting. Make sure your customers know about gamblingcare.ie and the free confidential helpline 1800 936 725. But here's the main takeaway from this slide. The single most important tool we have is you. The tech flags things, but it's the staff dealing with customers or analysing customer activity who know their customers, can listen without judgment and offer information rather than pressure if a customer needs it. If a customer asks about any of these or just seems unsure, take a moment to explain it to them. Self-exclusion is one of the most important customer protection tools available, and for licensed operators, providing it is a legal requirement under the Gambling Regulation Act 2024. When a customer makes the decision to self-exclude, they are telling you they need help to stop. And that takes courage, and your job is to make that process as straightforward as possible. There are two ways a customer can self-exclude. In a retail shop, the customer completes the self-exclusion form themselves and hands it in at the counter along with a photo of themselves. Your role is to receive the form and photo, update the exclusion list, and make sure the customer leaves with the relevant safer gambling support information. Once on the list, it must be checked regularly by staff so they are familiar with all of the customers that have excluded from their betting shop. For online customers, self-exclusion is completed directly through the operator's platform or via the central self-exclusion register, which is yet to be completed by the regulator. The customer selects the time period they wish to exclude for and completes the process themselves online. As an online operator, you are required to have a self-exclusion facility in place and to ensure it is working effectively at all times. In both cases, the rules are the same. Never serve or market to an excluded customer without exception. You should watch for customers trying to get around their self-exclusion. A retail customer trying to place a bet regardless of their exclusion, or an online customer trying to open a new account, maybe using a different email address or date of birth. If you spot it, you must refuse service. Provide them with further safer gambling information and log it in your SR log. Knowing your customer, safer gambling, problem gambling, gambling addiction, customer interactions, all of this can be daunting. People can feel nervous about hurting a customer's feelings or worry that they might cause offence, and that nervousness can lead to hesitation, and hesitation can mean the next step never gets taken. This slide is about recognising where that can happen and what to do instead. So let us go through each one. Assuming it's none of your business. Well, it is. Protecting customers from gambling harm is a core part of your role and a legal requirement. If you notice something, it is absolutely your business to act on it and take the next step. Make sure you're familiar with your company policies on these steps. Or waiting for proof before acting. You do not need proof. A concern is enough. Trust your gut, raise it with your manager, and let the process take it from there. Being judgmental or making it awkward. The customer is not in trouble. You are checking in on someone you are genuinely concerned about. Keep it calm, keep it kind, and keep it private. Or raising a limit just because your customer asks. If a customer asks you to increase their deposit limit or raise their stake limit, do not do it automatically. Pause, think about what you know about that customer, and escalate the request to your manager. It may be completely fine, but it also may be a sign that something is wrong or escalating. There may be a cooling off period that the customer should wait for before their limits can be changed. Please familiarise yourself with your company's policy in this area. Then there's not escalating or not recording your concern. If you notice something and do nothing, that is a problem. Always log it in the SR log and always escalate. Even if it turns out to be nothing, a record protects the customer, protects you and the business. Or there's trying to diagnose or counsel the person. That's not your role. Your job is to notice, support and signpost. Leave the diagnosis to the professionals listed on gamblingcare.ie. That's section 3 complete. So let's have a quick recap on the important points. Take concerns seriously. If something feels off to you, it probably is. So don't talk yourself out of acting. Follow your company's procedures. Know who your escalation contact is. Know where the SR log is and follow the process every time. Use the tools available to you and to your customers. Self-exclusion, deposit limits, timeouts, safer gambling leaflets, gamblingcare.ie. Know what is available and be ready to explain it. Escalate any concerns appropriately. You do not have to handle this alone. When in doubt, bring it to your manager. And record your actions in the SR log. Every concern, every conversation, every step taken. We've covered a lot today, so thank you for sticking with it. If you were to only remember one thing from this course, let it be this. Knowing your customer is a critical part of your role. Every customer who walks through your betting shop door, calls your customer care team, or logs into your platform is an opportunity to notice when something doesn't seem quite right with them. Remember, you're not expected to be a counsellor, a psychologist, or a problem gambling expert. No one is asking you to diagnose a gambling problem. What is expected is that you know your customers, notice when something changes, and take the next step in line with your company's procedures. Sometimes that means having a simple, supportive conversation with the customer. Sometimes it means escalating a concern to your manager and recording it in your social responsibility log. Recognising a concern is only useful if you do something with it. That's why early action matters. And remember, this isn't just good customer care. It's also a legal requirement under the Gambling Regulation Act 2024. Knowing your customer and taking appropriate action are now an important part of every licensed gambling operator's responsibilities. You may never know the difference that a short conversation, a simple question, or an early intervention makes. But for some customers, it could be the moment that helps prevent fun and enjoyable gambling from becoming gambling-related problems or addiction. Every conversation matters, every decision matters, every interaction matters. Because when you know your customers, you give yourself the best chance of recognising when someone needs support and the opportunity to make a genuine difference. That brings us to the end of this training. Thank you very much for your time and participation. To complete the course, please take the quiz after this video. You'll need to achieve a minimum score of 80%, and once you've passed, you'll receive your training completion certificate by email. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, or if you're ever unsure how to deal with a situation in practice, please speak to your manager. Thank you.